Now that you've been able to combine deep expertise both on the technical and business sides of what you're doing now, how has that shaped the way that you lead teams, particularly when you have to both guide experienced professionals, but then also have an eye on the next generation of talent?
You evolve the most and fastest if you have a continuous learning mindset. And by that, what I means is like, be open to have a zigzag career. Don't be stuck into one thing. Learn about one aspect, get mastery over it, but be open to jump into something completely different.
Did you know that companies led by professionals with both technical and business acumen, so-called engineer executives, are over 40% more likely to outperform their peers in innovation and long-term growth? That kind of leadership is exactly what AEC industry needs today. Not just tech-savvy, but business-minded leaders who can connect emerging technologies with client needs. Our guest today, Jigar Desai, is one of them. As Principal and Regional Manager, ECS Limited, Jigar combines a deep foundation in civil engineering research with executive leadership to drive growth, innovation, and transformation across the industry. In this episode, we'll be talking about how AEC firms can break out of the usual playbook, moving beyond hype cycles to embrace blue ocean strategies, respond to macro trends, and lead with purposeful innovation to shape the future of the built environment. I'm your host, Nick Heim, and this is the AEC AI and Tech Strategy Podcast. With that, let's jump into today's episode. Jigar, can you share a little bit about your background and how your combined technical and business expertise has shaped the way that you lead today?
So Nick, I started. I'll take you a little bit back to my childhood. So my dad, he was an architectural draftsman, like the one who used to use like the ink pens and draft on tracing paper, and then he would translate that into like an ammonia blueprint, the real blueprint. So I grew up kind of watching him do that all my life. And so he went to architecture school. He dropped out because of financial hardship. So but he was always inspiring me in kind of doing something related with buildings. And I didn't know what architecture was other than the college campus he went to. So I kind of took that from there, and I stumbled into into a building science school of building science and technology, and didn't know that was like the architectural engineering school back in India. And I kind of got into that. From there, kind of worked for a general construction firm, worked for a contractor, very fast paced for, loved that, but didn't like the gypsy lifestyle. So I said, hey, I need to do something else. And what I was fascinated by was the building materials. Like I was like blown away by like so many materials that were being used in a building. And I thought that I need to do something. I need to learn more about building materials. So I started looking across the world of colleges and universities that were like doing state of the art, cutting edge, leading edge research on building materials. And concrete was something that was very fascinating to me. And I don't know, because it was because of the Roman history tied to it that I was fascinated by concrete. And I still remember vividly that a professor that taught us like the history of buildings, saying that, hey, they use like horsehair in concrete as fibers, and they used like blood of animals as admixtures because it had the hemoglobin that added the flowability and the workability of the concrete. So that made me fascinated towards learning more about concrete. And I got my bachelor's and a master's, and then came to Clemson to kind of do a PhD in concrete materials, focused on that. And so that kind of got me into the research side of things to understand kind of how things are analyzed at a nano level, kind of literally looking at like microscopes, things that might under a microscope. And it was very fascinating. And I spent I had a good experience learning that side of the of materials. After that, I realized that, hey, I like this. I like the research aspect, but I'm not the one who is going to be in a lab for the rest of my life. So I said, hey, I need to find something more dynamic. And that's how I kind of got into the engineering consulting side of things, working for an engineering consulting firm. And from there, kind of as progressively grew, worked on a lot of projects involving building materials to building envelopes to asset management, MEP, commissioning. Learned a lot from people who are way smarter than me, and kind of it rubbed on me. And I the more I learned, the more I figured that it's like there's a bigger picture to all of those things. And every time I learned more, I'm like, hey, there's a bigger picture to than this. So that bigger picture led me to kind of, get into the business side of things. That how can I learn and make an impact that would make a business case to make a positive impact, and because that's what we are getting paid to do, and how can we do things and make a business case out of it. And eventually went on to a business school, tried to learn how, like, new tools and new skills of putting ideas and making a business sense out of it. So from there, I'm now currently a principal at Engineering Consulting Services, another consulting firm providing geotechnical, environmental materials, and facilities consulting services across the country. And my role is a regional manager for we call it the Northern Mid Atlantic, from West Virginia to New York and to Maryland and Delaware. Even though New York folks, and the West Virginia folks, they don't call themselves to be Mid Atlantic. That's debatable, but hey, that's my team. Kind of, this is where I kind of operate, and then I help consult people like within the company on several kind of projects that are involved from a technical standpoint or even from a risk management standpoint.
And that, I think that was an excellent summary of how you came to be where you are at in your career role. But what I heard there is that focus on, right, the business and business use cases. Even when we, as you and I discussed, right, innovation is more than just tools and technology, which is another great lead into our next question. So can you tell us more about the shiny object trap in tech adoption? And then what are some of the bigger picture trends that firms should be focusing on to ensure their strategies go beyond chasing tools and shiny objects to actually solving real problems, right? Because it's more than just, hey, I found this great tool. It actually has to have some sort of value to the business, right?
Yep. No, I think I call the shiny object syndrome as like the SOS, like, hey, asking for help. Again, in my earlier days, I was like, uh, I came across a lot of people. They would equate innovation with technology, or like the technology tools. And if it wasn't technology tool, it's not in the same bucket as innovation. And then I was like, yeah, I kind of, in the beginning, I was kind of brainwashed with that, and I had a very biased approach towards looking at ideas. And then when I saw there were cases where we developed something that tweaked our business process, or a work process at a simple level, like how do you generate reports, how do you schedule people to go to do site visits, and how can we have like a pre-checklist sent to the clients and automate it, like simple things that saved like half an hour here, 1 hour here. And I felt like those were the actual actionable kind of things that are innovative. I saw them as more as ingenious rather than innovative. And and I started equating ingenuity and innovation, that there's a problem we are trying to solve, and we came up with a solution, and it helped us with real impact, rather than what I see right now is companies, especially in the AC world, and part of it is like, kudos to all the marketing leaders in the world, that they promote the tools and the technology more, that now we are trying to fit the problem to match the tool. And that is like the kind of, in a way, ass backwards, in a way that it's not, we are solving someone else's problem. And that tool may not be the right thing. It may solve one piece of your problem, but you need, what are you paying for? So I look at problems as like, hey, defining the problem, to define the problem, and like we spoke earlier, you need to know what a workflow and the business process is. If you don't know that, if you don't have that mapped out, how are you going to pinpoint the problem, and what are you solving for? uh, and if you don't know what you're solving for, what are you going to innovate? So it's like taking a step backward, and looking at innovation as, as like, hey, we are trying to solve a problem that may or may not exist right now, but how is it impacting a workflow? And that is where I kind of try to caution that, hey, vet any tool, technology that is being kind of pitch to you and step back and sleep over it and say, okay, what is it really trying to solve? Or are we trying to being infatuated by the technology or tool so much that we are willing to change the workflow just because we want to use that tool? And then another tool comes in, and then what? Now will you change your entire process for that? So it's like the tail wagging the dog, and I try to avoid doing that by thoroughly vetting the problem and then looking at the different tools and seeing which ones fit my need and which ones checks the most of my boxes that will help me solve the problem.
And Jigar, I love that summary. I can relate, as we were discussing earlier, but it's right, it's like a solution in search of a problem, which is never good because you're letting someone else's product or desires or needs like actually dictate your business strategy, which is never a good thing, right? It's your business, not theirs, and that's what should come first.
Yeah, and I thought one of the things that it's like, I'm a proponent of small pilot programs that, hey, if someone is like so passionate about their product that they're selling or the tool that they're selling, I asked them, would you be open to doing a pilot? And let's do a pilot together. Let's find out, does it really make sense to scale it, and what is a how is it impacting at a small scale? And then if there is tangible evidence, then let's adopt it. Not that like blindly adopt it, but at least giving a fair shot and doing small pilots. And if someone is not willing to do those pilots, then I'm like, hey, good luck and goodbye kind of thing. But those pilots, I feel like we are very helpful. And there are people who in each company across like different generations of staff, they're all willing to kind of raise their hand if there is a pilot that they want to be part of, something that is new, and give feedback and compare it to what is being currently used.
And as they say, right, it takes two to tango. And if your a potential technology provider isn't willing to meet you for that very first tiny step, I think that says a lot. Kind of as you implied, and that gives a great way to actually building a business use case, a lot of which revolves around the topic of ROI. And to the audience, if you're not kind of familiar with running these pilots, one simple way to actually do that is just pick a small process, say writing a report, and it says, hey, today it takes us 4 hours to do this task, and we run a pilot. And we say that same task with this tool took 45 minutes. Well, then you have data that you can actually use to then build a small business use case. Then that's where the scaling starts to come as part of the discussion. But if it doesn't work in that small pilot phase, well, either it's a dud or something was wrong with your pilot, right? So you're getting some data either way, and then it's up to you to evaluate what that actually means in the context of your business.
Yeah, absolutely, absolutely. No, it's awesome that I've seen like some pilot that have kind of worked really well, but then businesses would not kind of have the money to invest to scale up, and by the time they are ready, now there's a new tool in the market and a new technology that is being used. So now you kind of start the whole process again. So it's always like playing catch up, and I kind of relate that the kind of going back to the shiny object. It's that at times we all feel that FOMO, that hey, if we don't adopt this now, man, it's like our competition will adopt it, and now we'll be left behind. And that kind of sometimes drives the decision making. And I don't know, it can work either way, but it's like flipping a coin toss. If it's a good tool that is vetted thoroughly, great. But if it's not, then we'll always be changing tools, and that will bring to fatigue within our teams. And now they are like, okay, anyways, we are going to change this in a year or two. Why are we going to like invest time into piloting or like giving real feedback, because the senior leadership is going to change it anyways. So that fatigue kind of is very detrimental to future innovation and growth culture.
Really well said. And another saying I love, Jigger, is leverage works both ways. So if you see if you're worried about your competition, using this tool that maybe you haven't had the chance to vet or doesn't quite fit in your process, I mean, they could very well be in the same boat, and application of it may end up worse. They may end up worse off for applying the wrong tool. It all just depends. And I think that it just goes back to your point earlier of understanding how your business works before you get the tools and technology involved.
Absolutely, yeah. I think we try to at ECS we try to, and even at our previous firm that I was at we try to we try to explain, do you know how your company makes money? And it's as simple as that. And in a way that once you know how the company makes money, some of the workflow you understand them in a much better way, and then you realize that, okay, if we bring efficiencies here, then how can you make an impact, a positive impact that shows up on the project profits, and then eventually on the monthly income statement and the annual income statement of the company.
And Jigger, I think your background is unique in that, right? You started engineering and then went back to business school. You run into individuals who have taken a similar path to you, right? But I think many engineers opt to just not go down that route, which makes your particular expertise interesting because you've seen it from growing up technically in the profession and then being able to apply the business acumen later, which leads into my question, which is, now that you've been able to combine deep expertise both on the technical and business sides of what you're doing now, how has that shaped the way that you lead teams, particularly when you have to both guide experienced professionals, but then also have an eye on the next generation of talent?
No, great question. And yeah, I like to, again, I learned this term that, hey, I fit into this category of a T-shape professional profile or a pie shape, which is basically having a deep expertise in one or two technical areas, and then having a broad understanding of a lot of different aspects at a bigger picture. So I try to kind of see myself as that, or I try to elevate myself to that level. And I had a very linear career, right? I started in a high school taking STEM courses, and then got into science and engineering courses in college, and not because of hey, this was a choice. It was more hey, unless you are an engineer or a doctor, it's a taboo. You're shamed in a way. So I didn't have a choice. I wasn't too smart to be a doctor. So I said, hey, what's the next best thing I could do? No, I'm just kidding. We have so many smart engineers. And so I was I liked the engineering side, the being hands-on much more. And so that's why I got into engineering, and then took the path of taking just staying there. The way I have over the years, I've evolved my perspective on, you evolve the most and fastest if you have a continuous learning mindset. And by that, what I means is, be open to have a zigzag career. Don't be stuck into one thing. You learn about one aspect, get mastery over it, but be open to jump into something completely different that will challenge your knowledge base, and learn something completely different. For example, going from, let's say, structures to building envelope, like in your case, Nick. uh, they are kind of complementary, but building envelope is a completely new word.
Mhm.
How can someone challenge themselves to go from building envelope to a business scenario, or going into some other technical expertise? Having that zigzag path of learning, it makes someone very well rounded. And having that continuous learning mindset is what I lead my team. So my team is multi-generational. I have Gen Z's and millennials and the boomers. I have all of them, the whole gamut. And they all have different aspirations. They all learn differently. And there are stereotypes around all of them, which I have found are not true for the most part. And they learn differently. Their aspirations are along learning. Challenge them, and they will learn, and they're willing to grow. So I the way I lead teams is empower them to come up with ideas, but also come up with solutions. Do your research, do your homework, tell me why you think it's a problem, and tell me what can be done, and give me something that you show me that you're passionate about it, and empowering them and rewarding them for that. And these pilot projects that I talked about, I use those pilot projects and engage those people the same people who are passionate about learning, continuous learning, and connecting the two. So there is always that burning kind of light within them that they're working towards a bigger purpose, not just doing the same assembly line routine thing, because after a while it gets boring. It feels like a cog in a wheel, and like it's assembly line process. So so that is the part that I challenge our principals who are in my team, associate principals to entry level staff, associates, to keep thinking outside the box, keep learning, and invest time in learning, and then challenging the existing workflows, the way we are doing business, and come up with ideas that what can be done differently. Just don't say, hey, this doesn't work, this is not useful, but so what now, what's your idea, tell me more. And I think that kind of helps them grow themselves, and keeps that learning. And plus, like when we do their performance reviews, that is part of their performance reviews too. Okay, what have you done differently this year compared to last year? How have you grown? What new skills have you added? And that is something we are one of the things we are focusing on, is like, as part of Project Spotlight, we want to highlight the project successes that we have worked on, where we are cross collaborating between service lines, or how are we responsive, but also telling them that how did we do things differently compared to what you have seen before. And it kind of creates the culture of like them to think differently and say, hey, we need to do every time, if it's the same question that comes up, that there is a leak in a window, and how will you solve it the same way every time with the same tools and the same process? uh, Fundamentally it may say the same, but what new things are you using, what new tools are you using to improve your workflow, as well as come up with innovative solutions? And are you staying in touch with the market trends? What are the new products and the tools that are available? Are you utilizing them? So it kind of, we challenge, I lead it as like, I take it my responsibility to kind of build that culture, and then my office captains and other principals, they kind of enforce that, or they kind of build that culture. And how can we ask them to look outside, and they have to do other things to kind of be relevant. As a consultant, knowledge is our only value that we add. We are not building things, so how can we be relevant? And if we are not relevant, then nobody will pay us.
Well said. And Digger, what I heard there is from bottom to top, if you're right an individual contributor, you're just starting out in your career, you can go and still provide value with perhaps new ideas that maybe some of your coworkers aren't thinking about, right? But don't it. And I learned this early on, thankfully, from a great mentor. Is just don't go rushing in with a problem, like you said. You have to have some sense of a solution that your boss or your mentor or your manager can help you work through. And then from the top looking down, right? If you're that mentor or boss, like don't be receptive to what that perhaps less experienced coworker is saying. And I even fall into the trap of, hey, like we've done it a certain way before, it works just fine, why are we going to change it? And that's coming, someone, I see myself as relatively innovative person, so it's something we just have to be on the lookout for.
Yeah, absolutely. It's all. I learned some of the best things from on the field, from field technicians, and who have taught me a lot that I I would not have learned uh, quickly had I not been receptive to them and kept asking them, tell me how you do it, tell me how to do this, and what do you see here, what should I be looking out for? And I think it builds a lot of credibility too. If you go up in your career, and kind of it brings that credibility and trust when you lead those same people sometimes, then if you're fortunate to lead them, then it's great.
And speaking of change and doing things differently, Jigger, this next question is more about blue ocean strategies. So it's a multi-part question, but we'll start with, what is a blue ocean strategy? How have you made use of tools like the ERRC framework to unlock new value? And then the third part of the question is, how do AEC firms actually apply that in practice to provide value to their clients?
Sure, sure. So this blue ocean strategy, it's not my concept. I love to adopt it. It's a concept that is well established. And a blue ocean strategy, it's like, to understand blue ocean, there is a corollary of a red ocean. So the blue ocean is basically, think of a place that's like a magical world place that you want to be in a blue ocean, that it's like just you there. There is calm, serenity. And the red ocean is like, think of like, blood in the ocean, right? So the red ocean is basically think of red ocean as like companies that are fighting among each other. There is bloodbath, and it's so cutthroat that there is no differentiation. Everyone is trying to do the same thing, going after the same thing, without much differentiation, without much innovation, and they're going after the same thing. So the only thing they can do is just like, try to cut off the legs from the competitor by lowering the prices, or and trying to one up them. And that comes at the price of work culture, work life balance, lack of innovation, status quo. So it has a lot of negative effects. So people get into that red ocean mindset where there isn't much growth. They are not open to new ideas or new things, and suddenly the things kind of world goes past them because they are stuck fighting each other, or like trying to go after the commoditized type of businesses. Blue ocean strategy focuses on like, how do we think differently and solve problems that would create a new marketplace for itself. A classic example is like, when iPad came, right? Like nobody thought that that's someone will need that. Why would someone need like a digital thing on their hand when you have a computer, a desktop, a laptop? uh, you don't need that. And so that is a classic example of how can firms think of ways that are innovative and that solve a real problem, not just something that is so fantastical that is just like is a shiny object, uh, but it solves a real problem. And but it also creates a new service line, a revenue stream that will add to their business. And it has a strong business relevance too, because now you're diversifying your revenue streams. If you are focused only on like few commoditized services or few revenue streams, and we are not diversifying, it hurts a company. It hurts a company's top line and bottom line. So this is a way of diversifying as well as thinking differently. So creating that blue ocean marketplace where the competition is irrelevant. You are not having that FOMO of like, hey, I'm trying to copy my competitor because they did this. Now we also need to do this, so that they don't have that as a differentiator. So we are not following the competition, but we are creating our own playground where now if you need competition, come and compete here, not there in the red ocean. So that is at a high level what blue ocean strategy is. And it kind of leads to, the second part of the question is like, part of the framework is the ERRC. Like, it basically, ERRC stands for eliminate, reduce, raise, and create. So basically, in essence, what it means is look for what you can eliminate, like in simple things, like in your workflow process. Identify the workflow process. Can we eliminate? What can we reduce? The reduce is like, what are the costs that we can reduce, the efficiencies that we can gain, and how can we reduce those aspects of it. And the raise is like, how is this going to raise my current return on investment? What is the client going to get if we eliminate and reduce these things by implementing a new idea? How is it going to raise the return on investment for a client's fee? And then the last is create. Is this creating something that is self-sufficient? That if we do this, is this going to solve the problem for everyone, not just our clients at that time, but is it going to solve the problems for my team, my company, and the client? And does it create that circular economy that now it's something that is like so efficiently run that it creates value for itself, and it is efficient, and it reduces cost. So we are not raising cost, but now you created a workflow in a way that is unique, that is not copying your competition, or that is not existing in the current marketplace. Now, in process of doing that, we vet all these different tools, be it technology, be it any other client owned tools, and use that to create something that is unique, that nobody is going to, not nobody, but very few can come and compete and say that, hey, we can do exactly the same thing. So that process, like we are trying to do that, like by in our company, by we're trying to create like recently we created a state of the art material science lab in Pittsburgh. That was out of that mindset, that how can we create a service line that solves a problem. It's niche enough, but it solves a problem that very few companies can solve. And if I can look at like how many companies across the US have scanning electron microscopy capabilities, there'll be very few of them. And then you go into universities. But in real world, for litigation problems, for forensic issues, who has the technical depth and the infrastructure to support high-end complicated materials consulting services? And that's a niche that we identified, and now we are helping clients over there through our lab, and of course through our staff that we hired, that are nationally renowned staff that that are experts in their field, and they provide that like one-on-one consulting, and we have the infrastructure to support that. Now we have created a little blue ocean for ourselves. We will scale it eventually, and to make it to materials of all kind. From like right now we are focused on building materials, but our vision is to kind of grow to test like alloys that are used in airplanes or rockets. That's our vision. But we are creating something that very few companies will compete with us, and it's a small example of blue ocean. Companies, when they look for those blue oceans, it helps their bottom line and the top line, but also mitigates the risk by kind of putting all their eggs in one basket.
And Jigger, those are very thought provoking examples because, like we discussed earlier, innovation isn't just technology; it's innovation in business models, it's innovation in materials, it could be innovation in tools and technologies as well. But it sounds like you guys are thinking about diversifying the business beyond where it sits currently, which is right its own form of innovation, of course. And I think along with that comes maybe some of the drawbacks of innovation, right? Like you had mentioned earlier in the interview, it's like, hey, like here's this new tool, but my senior management changes it every 1 to 2 years, so why am I going to bother learning it now? So, what strategies have you employed to help technical teams in particular stay aligned and adaptable during times of change and fatigue, right? Because with a lot of change comes a lot of change management.
It's a real thing that we have to deal with, and it's like, I call it leading through disruption and change management together. That we all are comfortable in our status quo, whether we like to admit it or not. We have our own little status quo that we are happy doing the same routine. I know it's predictable, this is how it's done. And as soon as we introduce a change, it kind of messes up the assembly line in a way. So it's like throwing a wrench in the wheel. And some of the things we have tried to do is connect with the purpose. What are we doing this for? And one of the things we are trying to do is like, our purpose that we have established for our teams is like, we want to create our workplace to be a destination, and destination for high talent, for people who want to express their ideas and views and be innovative, a destination for helping people all around us and impacting the built environment and the environment that is going to be built around us. So that is a destination we are trying to create, and that is the purpose. So every time we kind of regularly we kind of remind everyone, our teams, through different ways, by connecting them with the purpose of, we are trying to create a destination here, and to create a destination that attracts people to come here. These are the things we need to do, and part of that is innovating ourselves and reinventing ourselves, and coming up with unique ways of doing things, and accepting change, because the world is changing, and if we don't change, we will be left behind. So that is the first thing, connecting with the purpose. The second thing we do is like, we celebrate small wins, because it's like, destination is far away, but like we still need to celebrate the small kind of, the pit stops, like, hey, kind of enjoy the shaved ice on the way, and like the small victories that we have achieved in like going from one pilot to the other. Like, hey, great, we did this, awesome, what did we learn, and what can we do on the next one better? So celebrating small wins is very important, and recognizing the people who have taken the initiative, I think that goes a long way, because it keeps the fire burning. The other thing we look at is like, having that empowerment and autonomy. That is something that we have the overall strategy. We are we are saying that these are the things that we are changing, these are the things that will be disrupted, but we need to figure out the nuts and bolts of how all that is going to be implemented, because at a
Hmm.
high level it says that, hey, we will do this, but we still need to build the plane, we still need to build these things, and that is where we need to have the buy-in. So we have to empower and also seed a lot of the autonomy, that, like, as leaders, we, like, by title we have that, we don't know the answers, but we need to ask them, be open to ask them, how do you think, if we have to make it work, what would it be impact, what do we need to think of, what will we do to not impact our day-to-day workflow, because that is what pays our bills. If disruption impacts our cash flow, now that's a problem. So that is the one of the things that everyone understands, that we cannot say that, hey, to do this, we are going to shut down this office for 2 weeks. That doesn't work. So how do we build a plane in a way while it's flying, kind of thing. So getting the buy-in from staff at all levels, especially the supervisors, is critical. And finding our champions who are passionate about it, and rallying around them, and giving them the autonomy to implement some of their ideas of adopting change, I think is crucial. That I've learned the hard way, that, like, just trying to ramrod that, hey, this is what corporate told, this is what we are doing, and this is what we need to meet. Why haven't we done it? And it doesn't work. Doesn't work. I tried to do that for the safety program. It doesn't work, and I kind of I learned a lot from that. That how change management, when we really care, because that shows, if someone just ramrods through the changes, it means I don't care about what you other people think, and I'm not bought in. I'm just like following orders, and that doesn't bode well as a leader as well. So we have to be vulnerable enough as leaders to say, hey, this is what we want to do, this is why we are doing it, and going back to the purpose of why are we doing this, and this is not just for the sake of doing it, but why are we doing it, what is the bigger purpose.
And I really resounded, Jigar, with the comment of what you essentially said was it's easy to talk about innovation or disruption, right? Like you can get a pitch deck out and you can just say it, right? But you still gotta build the plane, so to speak. So I think you just need to be weary of like words do have impact and to motivate and rally the troops, so to speak. But as a leader, you're relying on other people to actually get the thing built, and knowing how to actually get that down to the execution is really important as well.
Yeah, absolutely.
Which then is, I think this discussion is a good follow into our next question, because right, there's all this opportunity, right? We talk about innovation and disruption. How do like firms like yours see opportunity, and growing beyond just traditional design and construction as like lines of service, and what does it take to succeed in those new spaces?
It's a great question, and yeah, if someone can find the answer, man, I think kudos to them. We are still figuring out how to do that. So what are the again? I'll talk a little bit about what we do, and then seen some of the best practices that I've seen in the industry. So we are trying to always be on the lookout for the old way, or the old way of thinking is like, always go ask the client what they need and build your services around that, which is great. I think that's how everyone does it, right? That's how all the AC firms, or even like any firm that's providing services, they try to do that. And the other way, a school of thought is like, okay, sometimes the clients don't know what problems they are going to face, and how will we identify those problems before they happen, because the clients are not impacted by it just yet, but because of the changes that we are seeing in the industry, they will be impacted big time. And how do we develop services that would help them at that time. So when we grow, we try to look at it from different ways, like from two ways. One is like, okay, diversification of our services and building on our strengths of what we have. uh, so that includes kind of geographic growth, like how can we help more people across a wider footprint. And the other is like, how do we go into developing our technical depth and niche, that would differentiate us from anyone else, creating our little blue oceans. So those are the two things that we kind of focused on when we are looking at growing and expanding in markets, or like just as a company.
Which that makes sense to me because and I've read in a book, it's called Loon Shots, where essentially there's this franchise model, which is just the business ho humming, doing as it does, right? It makes you your money and keeps the lights on, right? And then there's other factions of the business that are more dedicated to what the author calls these loon shots, right? These ideas that he describes as that they change the world. The difference being, I think you can have both. You just have to be intentional about how you actually structure the two programs, because often, right, like these loon shots, as they call them, get swallowed up by the franchise because there's always so much to do and there's always more hands needed.
Yeah, I think that franchise model, like it's a bad word, like, but a lot of the companies are in that mindset, in that model too, because it's in one form or fashion. Because any company that has so many offices, they are essentially in like a little bit of a franchise model. They, whether they like it or not, most of them are each office location is their own profit and loss center. So now it's a franchise. Okay, it operates like that. There are like rules and practices, there are business processes that are driven most of the times from top down. And now it's a question of like, we call it velocity, like how are you making money, how quickly are you making money, and are you keeping that same momentum of making money. That is those are the KPIs that companies track. And the, what you call the moonshots kind of thing, that those are the ones that, how do you carve out time and resources for those. And but if you don't do that, the challenge that I see is like, the franchise model, or the model where you replicate the same business model from one location to the other. The problem with that is it eventually erodes your profitability. Your top line keeps growing, and it's proven like by so many different kind of people who have done businesses, is over a period of time it erodes your profitability. Your top line keeps growing because your sales keep growing, but and then we start kind of thinking of ways to blame, like why is the profitability reducing. Is it because like people are not as productive because we are not billing the clients enough, or is there isn't much work? There is work because our top line sales are growing, but we are not able to charge them what we are worth, because we are in that red ocean, because we are like, to maintain our market share. The companies would want to have to kind of shave their profits, and the profit keeps going down. And now as that keeps going down, the resources that you need to innovate, they keep getting smaller and smaller and smaller. So it's like a self-fulfilling prophecy that, okay, you got what you wanted, but on one hand, because your sales are growing, but your bottom line is shrinking, so you're going deeper and deeper into the red ocean. And and at some point, like, it takes a major overhaul to create this blue ocean, or like to change. Otherwise it's like it's a hole that keeps sucking you deeper and deeper into it.
Speaking of change, one way that you see change come through firms in the AEC industry is M&A, or mergers and acquisitions, for anyone who's unfamiliar with the term. So I think the the first thought that comes to mind for a lot of individuals who may not be as involved in the space is, okay, merger, acquisition, right? We're going to grow, land, expand, and just execute the current business model, just with more locations, people, different geographies, etc. But there are other components to it. So how can strategic M&A unlock niche capabilities and drive innovation beyond just obviously just scaling like we discussed?
Yeah, so no, great question. And So M&A is like, kind of it like a lot of the times it has a negative connotation to it, that hey, like the big company gobbling up the smaller ones sometimes, and that's like the and sometimes it's like there's also the connotation that hey, companies may not be doing well, that's why they are selling to the larger company, or they don't have a future, that's why they are selling. And there's a real impact, because it's not a company, it's people that come with the company, right? Company is just the name, but it's the people that come with it, and the cultures are integrating. So I've been part of like, team scouting kind of firms for M&As, and it goes to what is your company strategy. And if the company doesn't have a well articulated strategy for M&A, uh, or for growth, I think that is the strategy for growth. What is your growth strategy? If that growth strategy is not very well defined, uh, companies struggle with kind of uh, doing M&As. So why are we doing an M&A? And some of the reasons you mentioned is geographic expansion, to get some capabilities, or sometimes get like, intellectual property, to kind of get something and create that blue ocean where they don't have that, but now they want to go towards that. So they are actively investing into places that would give them those niches. Uh, if that is not clear, then it's not it doesn't work out well for companies who are acquiring and companies that are getting acquired. So one is like, what is the strategic alignment? Does it align? If the growth strategy is that we are going to grow organically by so many percent and inorganically by so much percent, that is very well defined. Now you have a budget, now you have the resources, great, that's for check one. But now with that budget, what are you going to do? What services do we want to go into? What is that moonshot that we are trying to reach? And to go from here to there, what are the missing pieces, and how do we fill those? uh, I think that is the part, that if that is not clearly outlined, that if we want to be in 10 years, if we want to be the more known as the most innovative infrastructure consulting firm, what does that mean? Like example, like, like there's a large ENR, like top one or top like five companies. uh, they made a decision like 10 years ago that they are going to go from their construction to advisory, and they're going to slash it by 50%. So by 2035 they want to go to advisory services as 50% of their revenue. That's a huge pivot, and they made acquisitions focused on that because they are wanting to go into advisory services. That started 15 years ago. But that was their thing, that they want to get into consulting for like infrastructure for everything, for big cities, small cities, name it. So if that is clear, you can fill the gaps much easily, rather than just growing for geographic expansion. Or if we say that hey, if we want the NDT farm because our guys are too busy, they can't cover the work, and now we need more people, we can't hire people fast enough. uh, and a company will acquire a NDT firm because now that they have people. So that's just building the same thing, you're just adding more staff. It doesn't add much value. You are just doing the same thing that you used to do, you just added more bodies. You're not buying any more, getting a strategic advantage over anyone, over your competitor. So so that M&A is like, I see it as like a golden opportunity to keep looking if the AEC firms are not looking out and understanding their competition, because a part of the M&A process is like knowing your competition, knowing the firms. That gives you a lot of intel about what are these firms doing that may be small now, but hey, given the right platform, they can grow into something massive. And just being in that mindset of looking around and asking, and be open to kind of acquiring a firm or even be acquired. I think it goes both ways. Like smaller firms, they have reached their plateau and they may not have anywhere to go, but if they have greater ambitions and want resources, it's a great kind of a mutual fit for them. But there are firms also where they are buying, they don't have identity of themselves, but they cobble up companies like just to build up a huge kind of a pie, and then they package the pie and then sell it off. Now those are the firms that I'm leery of, that I'm like, okay, what is their identity, what is their DNA, because it's made up of like 20 different DNAs, and now they're all mismatched. And how do you kind of, that's the other side of the spectrum.
And it sounds to me like, Jigger, it's a conscious decision that's based on strategy that informs your M&A decisions, so to speak. Because like you mentioned, are we trying to acquire to, fill a niche vertical that we have to keep outsourcing? Or in the case of your last example, are we just acquiring just to grow and then be able to roll it up and sell it off? But it goes back to this theme, I think, of this entire conversation that whatever you do in terms of innovation, business model, M&A, product, technology, like there's some business strategy or reason that you're doing it, and you should get very clear on what that is before you act.
Absolutely. Yeah. I think if that is clear, that is your North Star, then I think, the other thing is falling into place. I always caution that, hey, if your North Star is like, hey, grow your sales and be profitable, that's not a North Star. That's like, that is like, that is too vague, and you're not like having like, you're not putting enough thought behind like where you want to go from here to the next level, and be futuristic, because it's always the age old challenge of how do we stay in the present, know about the past, but like position ourselves for the future, right? That's 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 always the age old challenge. And the thing that, at least from my experience, what I have seen is we try to solve problems that happened yesterday in the past, but we try to solve them today, assuming that the same problems will happen again in the future. And we assume that the world around us is going to stay still. And that's like that just boggles my mind, that we are like so living in a frog in a whale syndrome, that we assume that the future is not going to change, even though we talk about it, but then we solve problems as if they are going to repeat again. And we are using the same tools, same process, same way of thinking, and that doesn't help us. So, and then part of the, and again, this is my personal opinion, that is part of the problem of our AEC industry, that we kind of are in our own ways of thinking, and we always done it this way, and we face the problems this way, and they will like come again, and this is how we have solved it always, and this is how we will solve it again. And that's why we don't innovate, I think, as quickly as we could.
And I think there's certainly a market for that, right? Like in any business, it's, hey, like the problem doesn't really change. We have the knowledge that our clients don't, and we can run this play. But I mean, might that change tomorrow? You never know. Are there other parts of your business that aren't quite the same, mm, clear path from A to B? I think it just depends. But again, to summarize what I think you've really eloquently put here today, things are always changing. So you one, better get used to it, and two, develop a strategy to guide your people, your business through whatever is to come. And that leads us into our final question for the day, Jigger. What final piece of advice can you give to AEC professionals who want to move beyond reacting to like what's in front of us today to actually leading the industry into the future?
Yeah, I only two things that I would say. The one is like, having that mindset of uh one is like be humble, and again, like with age and experience, sometimes we and technical expertise, we all experts in our own fields, and that sometimes also brings in humorous, and that gets in the way of innovation and change. And I always, and to avoid that, my call is like, there's people should or leaders and people in the AEC industry should be always be on a continuous learning path. Keep learning, keep learning new things, add new skills. Don't stay still, get into a status quo, and stay curious about what's happening around us, not just in the AEC industry, but outside of our industry. But a lot of the things that impact us are coming from industries that are not AEC based, like Google, Nvidia. they are all coming and investing money in digital twins and technology in AEC industry. They are going to reshape the way we are going to do things. So how what is happening in that technology world? Learn about that. How is that impacting digital twin technology was used in logistics years ago, decades ago, but now it's coming to us. It's how is that shaping us? But so learn about what's happening in other industries. Be curious and see if we can learn some of the best things and experiment with it. The other thing is the last is lead with purpose and empathy. Understand the why behind your work. Why are we doing this? I love Simon Sinek's book, I Know Your Why, or Finding Your Why. And why are you doing this? And that can apply to business strategy, and it can apply to your day-to-day work and leading people and leading teams. I think if we know the why behind it, I think the rest of it kind of becomes natural. But if we don't know why we are doing this, or we don't have the purpose, then it everything else is kind of it doesn't go well. But I know my why, and that's why I feel like I can stay clear for the most part, and like learn and keep learning from people like yourself and people around the world, that how can we help impact the world in a positive way.
Absolutely. And that was the genesis and purpose of like what we do here on this show, is just to help our fellow engineers out in whatever way we can. And Jigar, thank you again so much for taking the time to join us today. If the audience has questions for you, wants to discuss any of the topics that you and I covered today, what's the best way for them to reach you?
Yeah, they can reach me on my email. It's jigar.desai at ecslimited.com, or they can call me as well. I'm on LinkedIn. Look me up on LinkedIn under Jigar Desai. There are several of them. But hey, if you see my face and match it to the photo, you will find me.
Beautiful. Jigar, thank you again so much. This has been an absolute pleasure.
Thank you. My honor.
Please remember, you can find the show notes for this episode at aectechpodcast.com. There, you will find a summary of key points discussed in today's episode, as well as links to any of the resources, websites, or books mentioned during this episode. Until next time, I wish you the best in all of your engineering and technology endeavors. Thank you.